What do you do when past hurts surface at Thanksgiving dinner, Christmas dinner, 4th of July? The family gets together, stuff is unresolved, and a lovely evening goes to hell. Mended light. Okay, so this is piggybacking off of a previous video where Emily and Richard took Lorelai and Rory to Yale to see Richard's alma mater, and then he blindsided her with, oh, by the way, you should meet the dean of admissions. He's a friend of mine, and we have an appointment right now. And how that all just blew up in everyone's face, and how Emily didn't agree with Richard being deceptive, but she did agree with his intentions. And said things like, well, if Rory goes to Yale instead of Harvard like she's always wanted to, then she can live at home. If Rory goes to Yale, then we can go to bat for her because Richard went here. We both went here. If Rory goes to Yale, or at least if she applies to Yale, she has a backup, and it makes her more attractive to Harvard. Whereas Lorelai has always just been Harvard, 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 because that's what Rory wants. And that whole thing caused a lot of drama, and then they just ignored it. They didn't deal with it. There's a conversation in this episode about avoidance.
Okay, really? Wow, that's mature.
Avoiding phone calls, just leaving voicemails and playing phone tag because Lorelai doesn't actually want to address what happened. And because it's not fixed, because it hasn't been dealt with, there's been no accountability, there's been no apologies, there's been no recognition of what could have been done differently and a commitment to do so moving forward. She shows up to Thanksgiving dinner with her mom and dad and Rory and all of their Thanksgiving guests from out of town, and they just try and put on a happy face. And it goes well until it doesn't go well.
Rory, did your grandmother say you were a high school senior? Mm-hmm. So you're going through this horrible period of applying to college.
It's not so horrible.
Well, she's got it pretty well covered.
That's right.
All your applications are in?
I've applied.
You have a grandson your age. He's going through hell.
He's already been turned down for early admission to Stanford. His dream.
Took it pretty hard.
Children put so much stress on themselves these days.
It's pretty stressful.
He's waiting to hear from his backups.
I have a grandson who lives with his mother in Orlando. He's going through a very similar thing, poor boy.
How do they like Orlando, Claude?
Well, it's all Mickey Mouse this and Mickey Mouse that. They want to die.
That's too bad.
Where did you apply, dear?
Harvard.
No word yet?
I'm not supposed to hear back for a while.
Where else?
Where else?
Where else did you apply? Your alternates?
We're so curious. It's like we've been going through this ourselves.
Well, I'm pretty much counting on Harvard.
Well, you didn't apply to just Harvard, did you?
Well, no.
No?
Am I prying?
No.
We applied elsewhere?
Well, you can't just apply to one place.
Children wouldn't allow that.
Is that true?
Pretty much.
Why didn't you tell me that?
I was going to.
You have to be safe.
My grandson, 6 schools.
Same with Dustin.
Where else did you apply?
Just at some other schools.
Well, if you're aiming at Harvard, that would be Princeton, Yale, maybe Vassar, Wesleyan.
Certainly Yale because of Richard's connections, yes?
I would assume so.
Those are the kinds of places, yep.
The kinds of places or the places? Rory?
Princeton. Yale.
Rory, conflict avoidant, wants to keep the peace. And she comes by it honestly, because her entire family's conflict avoidant, because when they actually address the conflict head on, without knowing how, it always just goes super ugly. Almost always, I guess. There's a couple of exceptions. And so Rory has been trying to not tell her mom that she applied to Yale, because she knows that her mom is going to assume, Grandpa pressured me into it, this was not my idea, which is exactly what happens.
Yale?
Yes?
Yale, Dad?
Well, this is the first I'm hearing about it, Lorelai.
Oh, bull.
Mom.
Lorelai?
You did this.
I haven't discussed this awful subject since the debacle at the campus.
You forced her hand.
I did nothing of the sort.
Mom, wait.
You made it seem like you'd be deeply hurt if she didn't apply to Yale, and she's very sensitive, so that's as good as forcing her hand.
Lorelai, really?
You wanted her to go to Yale instead of Harvard, didn't you?
Well, that wasn't a secret.
Lorelai ne veut pas que Rory aille à Yale.
Je suis désolé de ce qui se passe ici.
Stick to English, Dad.
Grandpa didn't force my hand.
Honey, you weren't aware he was doing it.
She is not a puppet, Lorelai.
What Lorelai doesn't realize, of course, is that she's insulting Rory. That Rory is not someone who can think this through for herself, decide to do this, that she's only following through because she doesn't want to hurt her grandpa's feelings. It hasn't crossed Lorelai's mind, apparently, that Rory might have actually been intrigued in Yale based on their experience on the campus and the tour of the campus. When we have our own hurt, when we have our own pain, our own trauma, sometimes we become blinded to what's going on with other people. It's why it's important to work through. It's why it's important to heal. And even in the moment to stop, to calm down, and engage in perspective taking. And Lorelai isn't doing that right now.
I needed a backup.
But why Yale?
I could live at home.
You!
What?
Well, you got to her. That was your thing.
I'm afraid we started this.
This is not your doing, Natalie.
Encore une fois, je suis désolé.
I never spoke to Rory about that.
I don't believe you.
I figured it out on my own, Mom.
You're saying there have been no conversations, no emails?
I can read a map.
This is unbelievable.
And past indelicate. We have guests.
Yes, I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm sorry you have to see this.
This is paranoia, Lorelai. There's been no conspiring.
I'm not being paranoid, Mom. For 17 years, she was going to Harvard, and now all of a sudden she's applied to Yale and she's mimicking everything you say. This is just crazy.
Okay, point stock to Emily. Lorelai, normally, Lorelai doesn't really care that there's guests, about her parents' social life, but Lorelai had a moment where she realized, oh yes, we are with guests, and she says, yes, I'm sorry, you have to see this.
Where are my manners?
And Lorelai is backing down. And when I say points from Emily, I'm not actually judging. It's a very human thing to do, because now Emily's hurt, and so she's going to make her point. But the fact is, had she let it be for now, then this would have died off. Instead, it goes right back, right? It starts right back up. And Lorelai's had enough, and she's going outside.
Elle a dit que c'est de la folie.
Excuse me, please.
It's freezing out here.
It's Jamaica compared to in there.
It's just an alternative to Harvard. A backup. It changes nothing.
Oh, no.
Lorelai.
Mom, I don't want to talk.
Emily is actually handling this moment better than Emily in the past would have.
Improvement.
Emily in the past would have come out focused on Emily's feelings. I cannot believe you made such a scene in there on Thanksgiving evening with our friends. Why? Why must you ruin everything for me, Lorelai? But she's grown. She's grown enough that she's coming out now, and her first move is to try and reassure Lorelai. Lorelai, it's freezing out here. Lorelai, it's just an alternate. It doesn't mean she's not going to Harvard. She's approaching with reason. The issue is, because Lorelai is hurt, Emily needs to be leading with empathy. And if she feels like she's got a handle on it, she could say, Lorelai, I know how that looks. Based on our past interactions and based on what happened at Yale, I understand why you think that your grandfather and I have still been working on Rory to get into Yale. And I don't blame you for feeling that way. Please believe me when I tell you, we have actually respected your boundaries. We're trying to do it differently and to honor what you ask us to do and not to do. And so we've left it alone. Or she could say, if she's not ready for all that and doesn't see all that, Lorelai, I can see you're upset. And I think I have an idea why, but I'd like to hear from you so I understand really where you're coming from. And then just let Lorelai vent without getting defensive and with taking accountability. But it must be said that behind the scenes, Emily and Richard are showing up better for Lorelai than they ever have. And Lorelai, to her credit, instead of turning on her mom and lashing out at her like she would have done in the past and getting very defensive, she knows. She just made a scene at Thanksgiving dinner, and she knows her thinking is kind of clouded right now, so she says, Mom, I just need a minute to digest this.
I need time.
That's actually a really great drawing of a boundary. She's not saying we can't have this conversation. She's saying, I'm not ready to have it now. The only note I would give Lorelai is to say that, Mom, I just need a minute to digest this, or a few, so that I can see and think and feel clearly, and then I'm ready to have this conversation with you, or I'm willing. All in all, I know this looks like another fight between Lorelai and Emily, but if you look at the nuances of it, it's evidence of them moving towards a secure attachment and towards a healthier relationship. They're just not quite there yet, but they've taken steps. And if they were in my therapy office, because they're likely lost and they're hurt and feeling like, man, we're never going to get along, we're never going to understand each other. As a therapist, I would take the time to highlight all the things I just highlighted for you and say, no, this is, even though it looks bad, it's actually so much better.
Do you believe we had nothing to do with this?
Just for a second, Mom, please. Just let me digest this for a second. all this Yale stuff. Ah.
You can't even let Rory have one piece of our lives, even if it's her choice. You hate us that much.
Two notes for Emily. Lorelai just drew a boundary. She needs the space. And at this point, Emily decides to speak her pain. And I actually think it's a valid point she's bringing up. But one, she needed to give Lorelai the time she asked for and then have the conversation. And two, she needed to phrase it as, you know, I'm not saying this is it, but I'm telling you what it feels like. It feels like you can't let Rory have even a piece of our lives because you hate us that much. Because then Rory could see, wow, this is how I've made my mother feel. And even explore, is this a reason why I'm fighting this so much? Because if you know the show, probably there's a lot of resentment there, right? Instead, Emily shoots her shot. She shoots it too early. And she does it as this is what's going on instead of this is how it makes me feel, right? But again, points to both of them moving along much further down the road. What do you think about this, how all this went down? What do you see that was positive and signs of growth? And what do you see as room for improvement? Anything to add to what I have to say or any questions for me about handling these types of dynamics in your life? Let me know in the comments below. And of course, this is small potatoes compared to the epic dinner fight that took place when Christopher and his parents were there. I have a whole video on that, and I'm going to invite you to watch that right here because I know you'll enjoy it. Until next time, folks, keep shining. We need your light.